Good evening, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to yet another edition of Truth to Power. My name is Faraz Patel. I will be in your company for the next 45 to 50 minutes. Well, a few weeks ago, students went to the streets to protest. There was nothing violent about it. It was calm, collected, and they asked for one aspect and one aspect only, for historical debt to be removed by NSFAS and the Department of Higher Education. Well, it was supposed to be a calm and collected and peaceful protest, but then police used their heavy hand and of course a life was lost. It wasn't a life that was in the front of these protests. It was somebody who was just there and unfortunately had lost his life. Umtokozizi Ntumba was the gentleman's name, and now he becomes a name that has been engraved in somebody killed by the police and was somebody who was not right in the front line of these student protests. The student protests, of course, are demanding these aspects from the Higher Education Department and, of course, NSFAS. The question is, will these two organizations succumb to the demands of the students? So let me go ahead and bring in our guest. First, I have with me Sia Nyulu. He is the EFF Student Command National Spokesperson. I have also Atenkosi Mabona. He is the SASCO National Organizer. And of course, joining me from a media perspective, I have Tabo Molokwana. He is a reporter with radio station Power FM. Good evening, gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining us here on Truth to Power.
Very good evening, Faraz.
No, it's an absolute pleasure to have all of you here. Atenkosi, I want to start off with you. Of course, with COVID-19 delaying the registration for students, of course, there was going to be this possibility that the academic year would start late. When looking at historical debt, this was something that was raised already from last year. Why has NSFAS, even from last year, not come to the party to try and find an amicable solution with regards to this?
Thanks for us. Good day to you. Here was seated with a problem, not necessarily of the making by NSFAS, but a problem we have that is necessarily caused by budget cuts. You'd remember in the mid-term review budget last year by Tito around September there, or after September actually. In that review, we had a minister cutting about 9 billion from NSFAS. A 9 billion cut that has impacted on the planning of NSFAS to roll out funding for the 2021 academic year. So the level of preparedness was then shifted to lower our shortfall of about 6 billion, we were told by the CEO, the newly appointed board, and the institution itself, NSFAS. So you are seated here with another budget cut recently pronounced by Minister Tito of about 24.6 billion over the next 3 years in higher education. So all of that is impacting on the planning of NSFAS, on funding, on rollouting of funding, and of course on registrations. Our argument has been that the delay even in registrations this year, academic, is caused by NSFAS not replying timelessly to students because they have their own budgetary constraints. It is caused by institutions of higher learning not being able, or refusing rather, to unblock students to register with or without academic, with financial outstanding fees. You've seen at UWC, for example, the executive management coming out and saying, we will unblock everyone with or without outstanding fees. So they've done that. The registration at UWC has went smoothly. But in the other institutions of higher learning, where we have seen escalating number of financial blocks, some institutions, for example, UJ, demanding that students pay 50% before registration. For example, if a Chenkosi owes 60,000, must pay 30,000 before registration plus registration fee. These are part of the struggles that have caused this shutdown. And of course, we've been saying to the government and the ANC itself that these can be resolved. There must be a bold pronouncement by the minister to say all vice chancellors must intervene and unblock all students. Minister Tito must bring back the money that was cut from higher education and the NSFAS in particular, and then so that we may fund all students and not find ourselves having to shut down each and every campus because of these struggles that we face. And of course, we say there is money in higher education, there is money in government. For example, it took us a shutdown to mysteriously find the 7 billion within higher education, which the 7 billion was not there before. Now they've found 7 billion to fund the shortfall that we had and be able to fund the first year students, which were not going to be funded.
Sia, I want to bring you in. Sia, I want to bring you into the conversation. So why did it have to take this protest or shutdown to happen in order for the 7 billion to come? Surely this should have been something that NSFAS, along with the Department of Higher Education, should have brought in the first place to avoid what has happened in the last 2 weeks.
Thank you, Faraz. I think it's a matter of disrespect from our government, because as we all know, 2020 was a very difficult year for many of us. People lost jobs, there were retrenchments, a lot of people's parents died. So a lot of income has been lost by many black people. So it is pure disrespect from the ANC government to wait until there's such kinds of protests in order for them to see the seriousness of such a matter. Because, this has been something that has been happening since 2015. Students have been protesting since 2015, and until today, I'm crying about the same thing over and over and over again. Because there's no, it's not genuine for us to say, okay, we are going to clear you, you are going to register this year. No, that's not enough. We need historical debt to be scrapped in its entirety, because if you are just going to clear someone for 2021, then next year that student still has their debt when they have to move to the following year. So if you have debt from your second year, you are clear to register this year, but next year as well, when you have to do your third year, you are still not going to be able to register because you have this debt. So hence, as the students and the student movement and the fees must fall and the Sizofuna Ingani and various students movements that have been protesting across the country, ours is to say that historical debt must not be there in its entirety. So to go back to your question, Faraz, I think that it is pure disrespect. I mean, we are a protesting country, but for a government to disregard everything that is happening last year and find ourselves in this position, I think it's pure, it's a slap in the face from the government to the youth of this country.
Thabo, I want to shift the question to you. Obviously, when the dawn of democracy happened in 1994, the free education sort of rhetoric was given by the ANC. 27 years after that, from a media perspective, when you look at all the higher education ministers that have come and the current one now in Dr. Blade Nzimande, do you feel that students have been sold short by this government with regards to higher education and the funding of it?
Well, I mean, for us, it's true that, 27 years on, we are not seeing anything tangible, if I may put it that way. So such protests are now, have now become annual events, if I may put it that way, that often result in short-term victories for students without solving the intractable problems of higher education in the country, which has been aggravated by probably the deteriorating economy and political opportunism, if I may put it that way. So as Sia has said that, 2015, 2017 Fees Must Fall protest highlighted the cocktail of challenges, adversities across the country. the issues such as decolonization, gender-based violence, accommodation, and hunger were some of the issues that were coming to the fore. But the most pointed issue is money now. Deserving students are excluded from studying because they can't pay their debt, and the National Student Financial Aid Scheme funds are limited. It was under administration just before Cabinet decided to allocate an additional 7 billion rand just to alleviate the situation. But I mean, the Higher Education Department Minister Bladen demanded department knew what was probably coming, but failed to act. So I mean, we cannot blame the issue that they started planning the current academic year in November 2020 because of the pandemic and all these kind of things. But we understand the economic crisis of the country as yet. But there should be solutions that government brings to the table, because that's what the students are fighting for.
I think, Kosi, I want to shift the question to you. We, as you mentioned, 27 billion that was cut that's going to be cut over a 3-month period. That is a lot of money. But when we talk about foresight, surely there should have been foresight from the Higher Education Department with regards to this, because you have, of course, a number of people, especially from the disadvantaged Black African communities, who need this funding. So surely there should have been a provision made there. But it just seems as if the Higher Education Department has sort of lacked that foresight, haven't they?
Not necessarily. The blame may necessarily be put upon the President of the Republic, who is a chairperson of cabinet. The chairperson of cabinet, together with Minister Tito, here you have a budget adopted by cabinet. Of course, the Minister of Higher Education sits there, but the President is the one who's supposed to lead us, is the one who leads the country, is the one who has said higher education in particular and education in general is part of apex priorities of our government. But budget suggests the contrary. It suggests the contrary even in health. The budget suggests that the SOEs are an apex priority on this country. The budget suggests that private sector is an apex priority in this country. And of course, it suggests that construction, where the ANC leaders and some government officials benefit directly through tenders, is a priority in this country. Outside of higher education and health, because the budget cuts we have seen are coming from higher education, are coming from health, are coming from police. So in this country, we are dealing with the most important parts of government. So we can't put a blame squarely on higher education ministry, but the blame must be taken and the struggle must be taken to the doorstep of Minister Tito, who has presented to us an austerity budget, austerity measures inspired by a neoliberal agenda. We must take a blame onto the door of President Cyril Ramaphosa, who sits at the helm of the biggest institution, the presidency in this country. It is him whom we must march to and demand answers that we have seen the killings, we've seen the police brutality against protesting students, we've seen budget cuts, we've seen a lot happening under his watch. What is it that he's doing? So, as a South African Students' Congress, we have said to them, we will not actively campaign for the African National Congress in the upcoming elections, because we believe that we can no longer lie to our students and fellow students across the country and say, vote for the ANC because the ANC will deliver free education. They've failed for the past 3 decades now. So we are of the view that you can't blame higher education ministry because it does not have budget in itself. if you cut budget, you make it less effective, you make it actually useless, because the budget cuts have come, the cut has went to SOEs that are constantly being bailed out, and there's no plan to bail out a historical debt of students. Some students can't register as we speak because of this historical debt. Some students can't obtain their qualifications because of historical debt. I mean, if you have historical debt, it means that you can't even go fetch your degree or your diploma in a university or college, because as a result of not being able to fetch your degree, you won't be able to apply anywhere, and therefore unemployment increases. So this is a problem of treasury, which has its own agenda.
Well, we will continue in the conversation with regards to the scrapping of historical debt by NSFAS. Will it or won't it happen? And of course, the Fees Must Fall protest, which has moved into the year of 2021. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Truth to Power. Let's continue our conversation with regards to the Asenimali, hashtag Asenimali, that has happened this year. The fees must fall, moving into the year of 2021. Sia, I want to move the question to you now. 6 years ago, when of course that first phase of the fees must fall movement happened, then President Jacob Zuma said that free education could be a possibility. Is now, a lot of people have said, well, he's kind of put the weight on President Cyril Ramaphosa. But when you look at it, these are two gentlemen who sat in the same cabinet, who of course made these decisions. So surely President Cyril Ramaphosa knew that coming into his reign as president, he knew what he was into.
No, there's no weight that former President Jacob Zuma put on our current president, Cyril Ramaphosa. It's just that we are being forced as society to deal with ANC factions. And now we as students are put in the middle of ANC factions, which is not something that as the EFF Students Command are going to tolerate, because throughout 2015 and 2016, President Cyril Ramaphosa was there. He was well aware about what is happening. And now even Blade is talking about Zuma has, when he made that statement, we're just being thrown under the bus with ANC factions that we really have nothing to do about. All we want is free education. When they promised us in 1994 about free education, Cyril Ramaphosa was there. Blade was there in 1994 when they were writing their manifesto wanting votes from people and promised the South Africans free education. But now, come 2021, all of a sudden, now Cyril is a victim of Zuma's decision. There's no such. But there's just a lack of political will from the ANC government and from Cyril Ramaphosa, because we know that Ramaphosa is a capitalist who will never take out money to go and bail out students. Yet he has money, like the comrade from SASCO said, there is money, there's always money to bail out ESCOM and SAA. Yet there's no money to bail out students who need to get an education. In a country that has such a high unemployment rate, the government is not willing to spend money on education. Our brothers and sisters are languishing in the streets of our townships because they don't have money to go and study. They don't have money to go and print out CVs or look for some sort of employment. You know, yet as society and as the media, you must be very careful of these narratives that these various politicians are putting out there, because most of them are influenced by factions in the ANC government. So to go back to your question, Faraz, I think that it's not just a matter of that Cyril or our president right now is unaware of those decisions that are being made by our former president. He is very much aware of it, but because of his ideologies and because of what his agenda, he's a businessman. wants to make money, and he's not going to make money if he's going to spend money on the historical death of students who SIA must go and graduate there at the road. How is he going to benefit from SIA graduating? In comparison to how is he going to benefit and his funders when he bails out SAA? So we're talking about serious dirty politics here of the ANC government, and it's a pity that as young people, we need to be caught up in this thing.
Tabo, just like on the point what Sia is saying, that as students, they are being caught in the factions of the ANC, the dirty politics that are being playing, SOEs that are getting bailed out, and of course, one of them being South African Airways, where of course they receive, the billions and billions of bailouts, or some would say sort of administrating the BRP that needs to be done for the airline. When you look at a state, Tabo, surely a state's supposed to be functioning on number one, healthcare, as Atenkosi said, and of course, number two, on education. This is a complete difference what the current government is doing, isn't it?
It's certainly, it's something different, if I may put it that way. He is, it's Sia. Sia is actually correct to say that, they are being caught in the middle, or they are actually, being affected by the factions that are happening within the ruling party there. We saw it a couple of times happening with Minister Blade Monday briefing the media, saying that, if the former president did not announce free higher education at that time, we wouldn't be in such a situation. And it's true that the president, President Cyril Ramaphosa, is aware of what's been happening, because, they released a statement, I think it was last week, saying that, they condemn the violence that's going on during the feed protests and stuff, but saying that, they are developing mechanisms to assist the students' demands. But, it's a song that we've heard all these years. It hasn't been happening. Discussions have been reaching breaking point, also with the Minister Blade Monday. They are not showing up to meetings with students, sending the deputy minister. That has exacerbated the situation, because of, it seems like, students are feeling that they're not being taken seriously, because they need tangible answers to the matters raised. A state should be able to come up with solutions for the students. We've seen, you are right, that, the ESCOM, the SAA, now we're hearing that, the South African Airways is almost solvent and liquid. So it will be back in business probably by the end of this month. They've been given bailouts a lot of times. ESCOM has been given a lot of bailouts, Transnet, all these state entities. But when it comes to the issues of students, someone, just turns a deaf eye. A deaf ear, if I may put it that way.
Yeah. I think, Kosi, let's go to the protests that have happened. Now, a lot of people would come to me, and I've been hearing this, and it's what actually kind of irritates me when they say, well, why are the students going and protesting? What right do they have to go and protest? And I would turn around and say, well, I've been a student. I've attended university. I can understand where they're coming, where it's a struggle to not only fund their education, and I'm talking about Black African families that also have to take care of households, because they also need to put food on those households. So to those people who are probably watching the program and asking, why was there a need for a student protest? I think, Kosi, I'm going to start off with you. And please give a reason to these people to justify why there was a need for this protest, because I feel that it was necessary to finally get this government to listen to what the students have been protesting, not now, but for the last 6 or even more years.
If you believe that it is wrong for students to protest, or students rather are attention seekers, as some professors have been saying, then you're ignorant to the socio-economic issues of this country. Because access to higher education and training has largely remained in ivory towers. Black, African, and poor and working class youth of this country have been marginalized and excluded from.
I think we've just lost, I think, Kosi there. We're going to try and get him back. Just to...
Sorry, I am back here.
No problem. Please continue, I think, Kosi.
So I'm saying there's been systematic exclusion of the majority of this country, of course, which is something that is a footprint of apartheid colonialism. So the protests that you see seek to escalate or seek to break the doors of learning in higher education and training. The protests you have been seeing throughout the years are saying the fees are exorbitant, we can't afford them. Accommodation in higher education is too much expensive or is scarce when you can't afford. So the struggle here, the biggest struggle, is an access to workplaces. It is a struggle to better the lives of ordinary South Africans. So the struggle for higher education access must be viewed as a bigger struggle for economic freedom. It must be viewed as a pillar for economic freedom in our lifetime. It must be viewed as something that changes people's lives. I mean, the RDP program, for an example, is not sustainable. You give people, someone free housing every 10 years. Every people you give them free housing. Should we have taken that 150,000 rand of building one house for one citizen and direct it to higher education and training, train people to be plumbers, train people to be electricians, train people to be civil engineers, train them to be lawyers, and etc., etc. Train the working class and the poor in particular to be those in those professions. They would be able, or they would be enabled to be either employed or to be employers. You do not need to give them free housing. You do not need to give them grants of 350 for unemployment. You do not need to give them all of these grants that are here in this country, because they would be self-sustainable. They would be able to build their houses. I mean, you would see, if you something you must observe in black families. One student graduates from VETS here, goes to work as an accountant right here in Johannesburg. The first thing they do in the first year of working, they go do tombstones at home in Matatiel, in their rural villages, tombstones of their great-grandfathers. They go build houses and renovate the houses of their fathers, the grandfathers, and so on. They go back and improve the lives of their mothers, their fathers, who have largely been domestic workers, working in the mines, not being able to build proper housing for themselves and their families. So this is a cornerstone of a nation building. If we're focused and our priorities are straight as this country, you have had COVID that has exposed higher education, that it is not prepared to even migrate to e-learning. It is not even ready to broaden access, because in our view as SASCO is that you can use e-learning to broaden access to higher education and training.
Well, we'll continue.
Previously, disadvantaged institutions have been exposed that they are not prepared. But you also have a problem of COVID that has exposed our health system. Very poor, it's not meeting the standards. The haves, which in this country have something to buy, can afford it. The have-nots are dying. They can't afford even a simple mask. So you have all of these structural issues which are caused by our economy. So the government must begin to reprioritize its priorities through budget, not through lip service that we've been seeing. I mean, we're going to elections now. The ANC will have a launch of manifesto. We'll listen to a lot of rhetoric and nothing else. But when you see the actual job of government, 70% of the budget goes to the hands of those who have always systematically excluded us and oppressed us. So then you would have 30% going to us here, social grant, here, RDP building, and higher education. But even when you see cuts, you see them coming from education and health. You don't see them coming from SOEs led by Jamnandas Kodan. Thanks.
No, we'll continue this conversation after the break with regards to the Fees Must Fall 2021. Welcome back to Truth to Power. We're continuing our conversation with regards to the Fees Must Fall of 2021. Sia, I want to move the question to you. As I think Kosi had mentioned, all of this is down to the socio-economic problems that South Africa faces. And of course, the socio-economic problems that are squarely directed at poor and Black African families. And hence, this is the reason why we are facing this situation.
Yeah, I mean, our country has always been one that has always been violent to the Black body. I mean, even post-apartheid, you'll find that the majority of people who are protesting and who are on the ground are people from rural areas, from townships, and from working class backgrounds. So the Black body has always been seen as, useless in this country, and it's always been violated. Hence, I think as student organizations, we have to be very clear when we deal with these institutions of higher learning as to who and what we are fighting for. And when we do fight and we have identified what we are fighting for, we must be very clear as to who our enemy is. And once we have identified who our enemy is in the institutions of higher learning, we must then further outline who is our enemy outside of institutions of higher learning, and who and what is it that is actually in the way of progress of a Black child in this country. And we have to admit that, the neoliberal agenda that is currently pushed by the current ANC government is not working for Black people. The neoliberal agenda is seeking to benefit white monopoly, and is seeking to benefit certain cabals and factions in the ANC. It is not benefiting a majority of Black people. So I strongly believe, Faraz, that as student leaders, we have to be honest about, because if we are not honest and we have identified and we know clearly who our enemy is from both organizations, be it whatever student organization that is currently on the ground, be it the EFF Students Command or SASCO, we have to be very clear who our enemy is. And once we have identified who the enemy is, we need to deal with it head on. Otherwise, come next year, 2 years' time, we are going to be protesting about the same thing over and over and over again. And in the institutions of higher learning, it is not just our vice chancellors who are the problem. It is the entire council, it is the entire Senate. If you go to some universities, you'll find that in Senate, you probably have 5 Black people. The rest are only white. At Rhodes, I'm a student at Rhodes University, currently doing my master's. At Rhodes, in a Senate meeting, you'll probably find 4 Black people. The rest are white. And this is something that is happening across universities and TVET colleges in the country. They'll give you a Black face as a vice chancellor and a chancellor. So you'll have a Black vice chancellor and a Black chancellor. Okay, those are the main faces of these institutions. But in the central decision makers, in the tables where the decisions are made about funding, about access, a majority of people there are white businessmen. And the people who own properties around these universities are white lecturers. You say students don't have accommodation, but I'll tell you a DVC or a dean of humanities or something owns a building. That very same building that is charging students 5,000, and then that same dean or lecturer is surprised when students cannot submit assignments saying that I'm hungry. A student must choose whether I must pay 5,000 rent or I must buy myself something to eat, and still I have to send money back home, because if you know, most students who are on NASFAS are students who need to support back at home. So that stipend that they get from NASFAS is not just for things that are dealing with at home. So hence I'm saying we must be very clear who our enemy is, and once we've identified this enemy, we must attack them head on, because we can't be going to lectures and protesting when we are dealing with people who own half of the things that we are fighting against. When we say we want free accommodation, a lecturer will tell you, no, why do you want free accommodation? You want free education, you want free accommodation. Because why? The only reason why these lecturers and these DVCs and these deans are against these things is because them too are benefiting from these things. Hence, they don't want this protesting. Hence, you'll find lecturers who say no, classes continue, blah blah blah, and all of these things, because you are taking their food away from their mouth as students. So I believe, for us, that most of our problems that we are facing is because we are living in a country that is neoliberal and highly capitalist, and it is a country that is influenced by white people.
Tabo, you're listening to what Sia is saying, you listen to what Atenkosi is saying. All of this could have been resolved, but of course, your greed and power and decision making against the students obviously becomes a huge factor with regards to that. Tabo, as a journalist, when you look at what happened in 2015, shift it to 2021, it sort of is history repeating itself. And then again, you see a life being lost for a protest that didn't need to happen, but had to happen in order for there to be attention to be given to the students and for the attention to be caught by government and, of course, the higher education department.
Well, for us, I was there in Braamfontein when it happened. It was almost 3 weeks ago. I can just, paint the picture of actually what happened there because we saw it firsthand. So the protest was peaceful in Braamfontein until the police started opening fire to students and civilians, including us as journalists. Because, they just came out of nullas randomly and they started shooting at everyone. So, a civilian was lost there. That's in this whole debacle. He was not even part of the protest there. That he was coming from the clinic there in Braamfontein, and he was hit by those rubber bullets just after stepping out. So, police have been known to be heavy-handed when it comes to student protests in the country, and not only in South Africa. I mean, we know police brutality is a global issue. So there are questions now, with civil organizations asking instances that, are these police are properly trained to deal with crowd control? Who gives the orders? And also, one of the questions is what exacerbated the situation for the police to start shooting at, students who were demonstrating peacefully? Because they were singing struggle songs. You know what happened with struggle songs, particularly as a country back during the apartheid regime. People used to sing those struggle songs in order to, bring hope to themselves that the situation was going to be resolved in some other way. But, the financial exclusion of students coupled with unsatisfactory responses from the ministry made the national shutdown inevitable. That instance that happened to Mtogosi, the incident whereby he lost his life, it really, it had to, I don't want to say that a life had to be lost before government could just open their eyes the dire situation that the students are facing. But I mean, we've seen now the state has buckled in response to the protest and was forced to find money to support the thousands of students. But even now, there hasn't been more of a tangible plan on how the money will be distributed. The per student funding amount that the state pays to universities has been in decline for more than a decade now, meaning that, institutions, they impose, on-fee payments to students to recoup those debts. So those debts have ballooned in the previous years to, in the sector, in the past 5 years to between 10 to 13 billion rand. Now, we just heard the Wits University saying that, their debt is almost at 1 billion rand. But that shouldn't be the problem for the students. There should be, some sort of discussions between the vice chancellors, as they had meetings last week amongst themselves, the 26 vice chancellors of the country. There must be discussions. There must be debates on such issues, on how do, as a country, resolve such a situation, or else we're going to be seeing these protests coming in year on year, as it's been going on since 2015.
Well, we will be wrapping up the conversation after the break with regards to the Wits Asinemali protest, and of course the protests that have happened across the country, and Fees Must Fall of 2021. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Truth to Power. I think, Kosi, I'm going to go straight to you. I know a lot of the demands have been made. Here's 4 of the demands that are 4 of probably the most important. Of course, the full return of the academic program on campus under level 1 lockdown, the clearance of historic debt, the immediate provision of postgraduate funding, and of course, all first years must be allowed to register while government resolves the funding matter. I think, Kosi, do you believe that all 4 of this can be achieved as we speak right now?
Of course, they can be achieved if there is will by government, inclusive of another aspect that I think, would say there are 5 priorities in our view. That we must find a means to fund the missing middle. There's students, or South Africans we refer to as missing middle, who earn a total amount from households of total amount of 350,000 per annum to 600,000 per annum. We are of the view that the cost of living and studying has escalated. The price of petrol has been increasing. The price of bread is increasing. The fees in higher education have been increasing, and quite a lot of things have been increasing that affect directly the question of affordability. So you need to review that and say, we'll fund from a cap of 600,000 downwards. That is a view we've submitted. And all of these are attainable. We are meeting on Monday next week to resolve, because we have given the top 6 of the ANC a task to say, let them all go and do a homework. We'll have a bilateral on Monday. And we are optimistic that a solution must be found. It will be found on all of these that we've demanded. Of course, others can be long-term. There are more strategic questions that can be found, so their solutions can be long-term planned. But there are others that can immediately be found now, much as they were able within a week to find 7 billion. So all of these can be attainable. We just want the will from the president. Thanks.
Siam, do you feel that the will from the president and the ANC and government, do you think there will be will? And of course, I know the EFF has been protesting across, the EFF Student Command has been protesting across the country. Do you believe that all of these demands will be met? And do you believe, as I mentioned before, the will of the president and the will of the government will be able to help the students during these difficult times?
I don't think there's political will from the ANC government to make sure that there's free education in this country. I don't think there's the political will from the ANC government to scrap historical debt. I don't think that there's political will from the ANC government to make sure that across the country there's free registration in every institution of higher learning. Because like we've been saying throughout the conversation is that the ANC government does not know how to prioritize its budget, and it does not know how to locate it in the sense that it is going to benefit a majority of people in this country, besides certain factions. The ANC budget, the budget cut by Tuto Boweni, everything that we read throughout that budget cut was factional. It was a liberal budget, and it had to do with their agendas. And I don't think that there is political will from a government led by President Cyril Ramaphosa to fund free technological education in our lifetime. Because if there was, then I don't think we would have been here even now. Because as we said earlier on, our current president was also the deputy president under the leadership of former President Jacob Zuma. So he's very much aware, and President Cyril Ramaphosa was there when various institutions of higher learning was sending proposals as to how this thing can be funded. He was there when we were having summits, and he's very much aware of this conversation, and he's very much aware of the debate. He knows how this thing can be funded. And if you are
okay, Sia is back. Sia, continue please. I think we've lost the connection there with Sia and Yulu.
Yeah,
so,
thank you, Software Command.
Okay, do you want to continue, Sia?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I was saying that as the EFF Students Command, we highly believe that there's no political will from the ANC government to fund free education, and you can never have free education in a neoliberal country and a neoliberal president who thinks in that way. Syria can never fund a free education. It's not going to happen under the ANC. That's my view in terms of whether or not there is a political will under the current government. We need a new-led government, a government that realizes the importance of economic freedom, a government that realizes that education is a means to success, and a government that values education. And I don't think that the ANC government values education, because it wouldn't be giving so much handouts to young people in the form of grants. It's so much handouts to say, close your mouth, vote. To young people. Young people are languishing on the streets. They are unemployed, and they are being thrown away with just mere small grants, 350. How is someone supposed to live with 350? Doesn't even make sense. I mean, I'm a student myself. If a 350 is difficult for a student, how more someone who's living on the streets on a daily basis? So I don't think there's political will from the ANC government to fund this thing and achieve our demands. They will give us lip service to shut us up and make sure that the protests are calm and everything, like former President Jacob Zuma did in 2015. Is going to be the same cycle over and over and over again.
Tabo, I literally only have about 2 minutes. I just need you to wrap this conversation up. As a media colleague of mine, are we going to be having this conversation in the next 2 to 3 years? Do you see a solution happening anytime soon?
Well, for us, free education in South Africa is the goal worth pursuing, especially for students who are poor and want access to, tertiary institutions there. I mean, if the country decided to, provide free basic education in public schools, across the country, I mean, they need to be finding situations to deal with, such an issue. Because it seems like, with Sia and Ati, they're saying that, there should be political will to address this issues. Remember, the announcement was done in mid-December 2017 by the former president, Jacob Zuma, that, there will be free higher education. Since 2017, now it's 2018, 2019, 2020, it's even 2021 now. So I think if government is not really, coming to the party in this issue and also coming together, bringing stakeholders to discuss, different sectors, if I may put it that way, to come and discuss this issue, then we will be having the same discussion again next year, the other year, and also in the next 3 years again. And just for your viewers, that tomorrow the 4 police officers who shot Thogoti Zumba will be appearing for a formal bail application there. So we know that the state is opposing bail. So we're going to be pinning our eyes and ears on that story as it unfolds tomorrow.
And hopefully, of course, justice will be served with regards to that, because the accountability of the police must be held on all fronts. I'd like to thank my guest, Atenkosi Mabona from SESCO. He is the national organizer. Sia Nyulu, he's the EFF Student Command spokesperson. And of course, a journalist from Power FM, Tabo Molokwana. That's, of course, all the time we have for you here on Truth to Power. We'll, of course, want to have another conversation with regards to our youth and, of course, what's the way going forward with higher education. But most importantly, I want you to enjoy the rest of your week. Keep safe as COVID-19 continues to hit our country hard. From all of us here on Truth to Power on ITV Networks, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.